What's up, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the J Rock Show here on here from the SimWorld TV studios here on SimWorld TV. It is your host, as always, Jason J.K. Candell, now with CBS Sports, and we are less than a week away from the SWBA draft next Thursday. We have a lot of storylines to go over for that, so I brought in a second pair of eyes, second pair of ears to kind of talk about that with me. I brought in the host of SWBA today, Mr. Clutch Time, the game time expert himself, Rico. Welcome to the show, Rico. First time guest. How are we doing today? And you ready to talk some draft?
Man, thanks for having me, JK. It's always a pleasure to come on to the show when I get a chance, and so it's the first time, and so it's great seeing what The Rock looks like from inside the studio. So it's going to be great here, just talking with you about this stuff, and so super excited, man, to talk hoops all the time.
Oh yeah, me me too, man. The viewers know us from being a bit of a broadcast duo. You're probably going to be alongside me a lot more now that Coach Drayton is officially now on the sidelines. Very exciting. Very excited for that.
Yep.
But we got the draft. We got the draft, like I said, 6 days away. A lot of intrigue. This draft starts at number 3, though. Cooper Flagg, we kind of already know he's headed to Dallas. Dylan Harper, more likely than not, headed to San Antonio to join forces with Victor Wembanyama, Stephon Castle, De'Aaron Fox. Maybe the Spurs do something crazy, but it's looking less and less likely as we kind of go on, Rico. But
Yeah, I mean, I think right now it's a foregone conclusion what's going to happen at 1 and 2. I mean, obviously, who knows what can happen on draft night. I mean, I'm sure that's some of the things that we'll talk about here with, potential trades and things like that. It just really depends on what's out there for teams. And so, a lot of this stuff is in the rumor mill right now. But I think the real question is what's going to happen from Philadelphia and down in this draft. And so, we had Lemarian Sherwood, who was on Clutch Time. And if you did not get a chance to see that morning show, that is on SimWorld Plus. And so make sure you get a subscription to that. And so, man, it was just great talking to him and just hearing that type of confidence, man. But, I think that there is so many different players that could go at number 3 in this draft. And so, yeah, I just really can't wait till draft night.
yeah, and the Sixers are in a tough spot. They were hurt for a lot of this season. You got Embiid, you got Paul George, you got Maxey, you got Jared McCain. Now you're
Yep.
picking between Jalen Snow, you're picking between Lemarian Sherwood, Jamison Johnson, maybe even Trey Turner. They have a tough decision to make with that number 3 pick. Lemarian Sherwood said to you, I think that I'm number 3, or I am number 3. Feels like it's leaning a little bit Jalen Snow, but I don't think a trade is completely out of the realm of possibility here. I'm looking at Utah 5. I've heard a lot about that, and you can kind of corroborate that in a sense, can you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's going to be interesting, JK. And just before we kind of jump into like Charlotte and Utah, what I will say about Lemarian Sherwood and that type of confidence, I love that because it seems like that his agent and really his camp, they really want to put it out there that he feels like that he can be a guy that shouldn't slip, past number 3, and he feels like he's a player that could certainly impact a franchise. And so I love it, from a marketing standpoint, how he's approaching this with the confidence and everything like that. You just mentioned Jalen Snow, who personally, if I'm Philadelphia, it's tough to pass on him because Jared McCain was injured last season. Paul George was injured as well. And so Philadelphia, they have an interesting decision because it's like, do they reset the roster, so to speak, a little bit here and try to make room for a guy like Jalen Snow to be an impact? Would you go with a big like Jamison Johnson or Lemarian Sherwood to maybe move on from Embiid? Like that is where it is very questionable with Philadelphia. And then, with Charlotte and Utah, With them, I think that they would definitely be in the market for a guard. I know that they have LaMelo Ball there, but man, he's been injured lately. And I think that Utah is still very much in a transition with what they're doing there. So I could see them go either the front court or the back court, really.
Yeah. Marsh and I said on SimWorld yesterday, that we thought that Lamarian Sherwood made the most sense in Charlotte. Mark Williams is struggling to stay healthy. Really, he would be a very good complementary piece alongside LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller. But then again, if you're picking between Jamison Johnson and Lamarian Sherwood, I'm taking Jamison Johnson. I think that I get them maybe wanting more of a pro ready prospect in Lamarian Sherwood. He's older, but he does have those injury concerns, and those are a red flag to me. Especially as an older prospect, I need you to be as pro ready as they come.
And that's fair. And I think what's tough too when you're looking at prospects now is just what can they possibly become? Because I think that that is really what the next question is with both of the centers here that we're talking about. Can either of them become players that can step outside the paint and knock down shots that way? Can either of these guys, be in a situation where they don't necessarily have to have good guard play, but they can still really carry a team. I think that that is like some of the questions that I have around both of these players. But we'll see what happens. I mean, as the buzz starts, as we start to get more conversations and things like that between who should be picked there, I just think that it's interesting when I start to look at both of these prospects in that way. What are they looking like a year, 2 years from now?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that the upside of Jamison Johnson is higher. I think he's got a better jumper. I think he's shown a little bit more within expanding his range. Lamarian Sherwood reminds me a lot of like those back to the basket big men. He reminds me so much of Andre Drummond coming out of UConn that it is uncanny.
Yeah, and I think that like when you look at Drummond too, it's like he never really became a guy that he's going to be a pick and pop. He can knock down shots and stuff like that. Like he literally is just cleaning up stuff off of the glass. You're looking at him being a rim runner, catching lobs and things like that. And for the people out there that maybe don't know who Drummond is, maybe somebody that they're more familiar with is like a DeAndre Drummond and or not DeAndre
DeAndre
Drummond,
Jordan.
excuse me, DeAndre Jordan and Lob City, like a player that just really they feast off of the activity at the rim, right? And so I think that's the question mark between both of those centers is just that do you get more than just maybe a rim runner and a player that's going to clean up at the glass? Is there going to be more to their game that they can give you? Because I really think that that is the key for how high either player is going to go, over the next couple days here when we get to the draft.
Yeah. And I think that's a great point. I think if you're given the choice, I think Utah's such an interesting spot, like you mentioned. They can go front court, they can go back court. They're in a lot of trade talks for a lot of different players, but you're probably picking between one of Cooper Kingy Cross, Jameson Johnson, and Lamarian Sherwood. And that's going to be a very, very difficult decision for a guy like Danny Ainge to make. I think it's really hard to pass up on Cooper Kingy Cross after the top four picks.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm right there with you because at the guard play for Utah, it's so interesting, right? Because they got like Jordan Clarkson, they got Colin Sexton. Like, I mean, these are players that I'm not sure that Utah is necessarily in love with them. So I could definitely see that they could be shipped off. I really do. And I think that when you're talking about CKC and just how dynamic he can be, with a guy like Isaiah Collier, who they just got in the draft last season, like I think that that could be a really dynamic type of backcourt, and maybe that's the direction that Danny Ainge wants to go with this front office. But I could definitely see that. I do feel that Utah would go with the guards because they do have some solid bigs here. I like that they've got Cody Williams in the front court, and Walker Kessler is a player that they use at the power forward in the center. That really there's a lot of interest in there, but it's interesting because there's so much. as far as like Utah basically jacking up the price for him. And so I don't think he's a player that necessarily he's moved easily. And the same could be said about marketing as well. Like I think he's a player that's in a lot of these trade talks, but I don't think that Utah's necessarily sold on moving those. And so a guard like CKC, man, I think that that's going to get you some more ticket sales in Utah.
Oh yeah, like it's all about putting butts in seats. This was a point I had Coach Drayton on the show. I think it was during the season, and we were talking about putting butts in seats, and it's why Jalen Snow could go higher than a guy like Lamarian Sherwood. Guards are a little bit more captivating to these audiences. Think about what we have in the finals right now. Two centerpieces are both guards, and Shea Gilgeous-Alexander and Tyrese Halliburton. But this isn't an SWBA show. That was just a point I wanted to bring up. But I think the team that really wants Cooper Kingy Cross to fall, it's that team picking at 6 in the nation's capital, right in his backyard in College Park, the Washington Wizards. They would love Cooper Kingy Cross and Bub Carrington as the long-term backcourt.
Yeah, I think that that also makes a lot of sense too, because when you look at Bub Carrington, I mean, he's a guy that really can be a triple double type of threat for you on a night to night basis. And they already have a big that they think is going to be the future there in Alex Sarr. So I think that he had a solid rookie season out there. I think he got a lot of minutes and just really went through the growing pains and things like that. But I think he's going to be much better in year two. And I think for the Wizards, if you go with CKC, that really gives you an out for Jordan Poole. And I think that they probably want to move on from Jordan Poole in reality anyway. And so I think that that's something where that makes a lot of sense for CKC to come on over. You already have Keyshawn George in the mix for the Wizards. And so they have a nice young core that they would have here with the Wizards. And I do like CKC with the Wizards. I do think that that is an excellent roster fit.
I think this back end of the top 10, you look at the Brooklyn Nets have 4 first round picks this year. You look at the New Orleans Pelicans just acquired their second. And how does having those multiple first round picks kind of affect I'm going to say the way that they're going to attack this? Because this is a very deep draft. This is a very strong draft.
Yeah, and a great question right there, JK. And uh, this leads me into the OKC philosophy, right? So when I look at Sam Presti, who I think is the best GM in SWBA, right, with the way that he was able to really build the Thunder, and it was through draft capital. It's through having multiple bites at the apple in the draft. And I think that when you are a team like Brooklyn, where you have good cap space. You have a movable piece in Cam Johnson, and you have these
Two
picks.
movable pieces.
Really,
Nick
this is
Claxton.
where what's that? Oh
Two
yeah, and you have
movable
Nick
pieces.
Claxton, who that's a player that we'll see what happens. Is he on the move or whatnot? Because that's going to lead me into my point. Because if you have multiple picks, this is where you can somehow get involved in deals that help players get moved to another team, and you can capitalize on that, and you can get some more draft capital. This is where you can also put together some picks, and you can move up, and you can get a guy that you wanted to get. And so I just feel like that you have so many more options as a franchise when you have multiple picks. And so whoever has the multiple picks like Brooklyn, you're in a prime situation. And so I think that Brooklyn, if we're going to start talking about teams that could be on the move as far as trading up, trading down, or maybe helping a Kevin Durant or somebody get into a destination, it's the Brooklyn Nets.
Yeah. I think that they're a team to watch. I think that whole saga is a thing to watch, but you talk about the Brooklyn Nets, and a fit I love for Brooklyn is Mr. DJ Wagner coming out of Arkansas. I'm higher on DJ Wagner than most. He's younger than Cooper King and Cross. He's younger than Jalen Snow. He's the same age as Trey Turner. I think him and Trey Turner are kind of getting overlooked at this process.
Yeah, and I mean, with DJ Wagner, you're talking about a player that truly has really blossomed kind of into an offensive threat here. And I think he's really come into his own. And, the question now when you're talking about this fit with Brooklyn, they definitely need a backcourt. And I think that they could also use bit of front court help to go with Nick Claxton. That is, if they don't move him. And so, the question is, do you think that he fits well alongside of was it Cam Johnson? I think that they have that's a really good scorer there with Brooklyn. And so,
Cam
I
Thomas?
wonder what the go ahead. You got.
Cam Thomas?
Yeah, I'm sorry, not Cam Johnson, Cam Thomas. Thank you for correcting me there. But
Yes.
or Cam Thomas, yeah, that's the question mark. Does he fit well with him? Because Cam Thomas is a bucket getter, right? And so, is he the guy that's going to be a little bit more of a distributor for them? Is he the guy that can be really the floor general for them? Because they need some type of direction out there. You can't just have two guys that just want to score the basketball at a high clip. Because what happens there is you eventually kind of stunt the growth of the team because you're having two players that really kind of cut into each other, and so that can be problematic. So that's where you have to start to think about just how would a player fit with the organization, and then you're weighing the talent situation too as well. This is why when you're looking at the SWBA draft, it is so tricky.
Yeah. I definitely get what you're saying. The top 10 is going to have so much movement. This top 10 is significantly deeper than last year's. I think there's probably 6 or 7 guys where if they were in last year's draft, they would have went number one. From this year's draft, they would have went number one. But here's a point I want to bring up, Rico,
Yep.
is the later in this draft, the outside of the lottery guys, like the Gerald Carrolls, Kadarius Loftus, guys that teams seem to really love. But are what surprises should we kind of have in store or expect come draft night? Who could go earlier than we think? Who could we see slip down a little bit? What are the misconceptions we're seeing here?
Yeah, I mean, I think a guy like maybe a Bam Wallace is a guy maybe that you might want to take a look at on draft night because I think that here's the guy to me. He's shown that he can knock down the 3-point shots. He can also, or he's also shown too that he can be an on-ball creator as well. So taking the ball and being dynamic that way. But I think that he's an actual, he can be a better defender at the next level. I really do. I think that there were times where he checked the box for North Carolina. And I think he could be really a quiet surprise. And so we'll see what happens when it comes draft night. But he's certainly a guy that I've got my eye on is seeing what will happen with Bam Wallace. Another guy that I think a lot of people are maybe sleeping on a little bit too much for me would be Johnny Basketball Baldwin, as you would call him, out of Virginia. I think he's got this is a guy that has a lot of upside, offensively. And I just like, man, I like his dog. I like the way that he competes. And so I think he's a player that maybe you get him in the building. He changes the identity of your franchise up front. And he can also be switchable between the power forward and the center position.
Yeah, I definitely get what you're saying. I really like Johnny Baldwin. Another one who really interests me is his former teammate at Virginia, Tyson Simpson. Coming off that torn ACL, did not play at all this year, was not invited to the green room. Is that a player where we could see him kind of maybe not? I don't know, maybe if sneak into the lottery, but maybe go higher than people realize, or are teams higher on him than what you're hearing?
They should be, right? Because he's a big, and you're talking about the fact that he slipped down due to the knee injury. But just think about this when it came down to Porter Jr., that plays for the Denver Nuggets, right? Like he dealt with some back issues and he turned out to be just fine, right? And so I think that when you look at this young man, I think that he could definitely be a player that could be really a surprise for you on draft night. You talk about him as a center; he's got terrific size. I think he has really a good feel for the game, and these are types of players that intrigue me because when they're already counted out like this, I love it when they get to your building and then you just see the hunger, right? Like I think that that's something that can't be measured in the plus minus box score. It can't be measured in points and rebounds and turnovers. You either have that or you don't. And from what I'm hearing and seeing, this guy is going to compete his tail off, and he might be a pleasant surprise if you pick him up in this year's SWBA draft.
Okay. And the invite list was leaked early yesterday by Evan Sidery, Cooper Flagg, Dylan Harper, Lamarian Sherwood, Jameson Johnson. Those are the ones we expected. Well, Gerald Carroll got an invite. Mackenzie Mbako got an invite. Bam Wallace, like you mentioned. Madison Miles, Jermaine McLemore, Johnny Baldwin, Caden Ship. And then the two, a bit, I would say these last two are a bit more surprising. Glory Tate and Quincy Henderson. Any players you thought deserved invites that didn't get any?
I mean, as far as invites that didn't get it, like didn't get into the green room, I mean, I didn't necessarily see too many people that I thought that it was like, okay, they should have been into the green room. I mean, like maybe one of the players that I'm thinking about, remember the players from Houston, like Carl Holmes? Like he definitely was a player that it was like, man, is he going to be a guy that he could be in the green room come draft night? But I guess obviously he's not necessarily in the invite. So maybe he's a player that I was kind of thinking maybe he would get there. But other than that, I think that that really was maybe the biggest surprise for me. But considering how Houston really finished and everything else, I think he kind of fell off the map there with that team.
Yeah. The I have a few that kind of surprised me. No Nat Hawkins, no Dante
Mhm.
Walker, no Pooh Lewis or Kadarius Loftus. Those are the four that like really stood out to me. Is
I
that
would say Pooh Lewis, I'm right there with you. Loftus, I'm not sure, but Pooh Lewis, yeah. Now that you mentioned him, I looked at it and I was like, but yeah, Pooh Lewis, the way that he performed at the end of the year in Hoopsteria, when we were talking about like who increased their draft stock, it definitely should have been Pooh Lewis. I thought that he was maybe one of the most dynamic scorers in the tournament. And so for him to not get a green room invite, that is interesting because I do see that he could easily be within that top, 14 players, maybe even higher than
yeah,
that, because he definitely showed that he could do a lot of different things for you on the offensive end, and he'll compete too on the defensive end too.
yeah. The other two that kind of stand out to me, no Richard Prozarski. Feels like
Mhm.
the media is a lot higher on him than I guess regular than people within front offices. And Brian Vaughn, because Brian Vaughn is a polarizing figure in SimWorld U, and seeing him get his moment on stage would have made for fantastic television.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm right there. Like Pizarski, he's an interesting prospect, right? Like he's a guy that he really hasn't shown that he's a great shooter, number one. And then number two, with just kind of the things that have followed him, off the court and some of the antics and things like that. And so I don't know, man. I mean, maybe just too much of a distraction there, but I'm not too surprised with that. And so I just wanted to talk about that briefly.
Yeah, of course. But there's plenty more players that I think could have deserved them. You mentioned Carl Holmes. I think maybe you can throw Teravion Novik and Neely Cox in there. And other than that, I don't think it's that bad. I think they kind of hit the nail on the head for the most part. There's just a few that felt a little bit egregious, felt a little bit confusing. Tyson Simpson being there would have been really cool, Rico.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been a great story, right? And like I said before, I mean, he's in the situation of a Michael Porter Jr. So just saying his full name now. And if people are not familiar with that, he dealt with back issues and he got passed up by a lot of teams, but he still did, go, I think, relatively high in the draft. And I think that this is a player that he could be right on that same track because with injuries and things like that, there's going to be the red flag because everybody in the media talks about that. But what people don't see is the individual work that's done by the organization. And if their team doctor feels confident and comfortable with what they're seeing from the medicals, then they might go ahead and take him and surprise some people. And so I'm hoping, that this story turns into, just a terrific ending for him, but we'll see what happens. But he's definitely a player that I'm circling here because when you're talking about centers and things like that, I think he would have been right there had he not had the injuries.
Yeah. And we started this episode off talking about some good fits, but that was really in the top 10. Are there any like let's talk about some good fits between player and team that could be some good marriages in a sense where they don't have to be in the top 10 but where you're like this is match made in heaven. Does anything stand out for you in that regard?
Yeah, so I mean, I like it if we're looking at Travion Novick, man. I think that Travion Novick He's a guy to me that literally, if you're talking about pick 19, I think that he could be terrific for the Brooklyn team. I think that, especially if they do decide to move on from Cam Johnson, like he would be terrific. And even if they don't, I think that he would be a terrific fit there. And then, when you look at, just like a LeGerald Carroll, which I think he's going to go a lot higher. So let me jump off of him. But maybe Kadarius Loftus. And so I think that Kadarius Loftus, man, he would be really an excellent, excellent fit, for I'd say I want to say like Boston, maybe in pick 28 there, because they're in an interesting situation because without Tatum, who I think is going to probably be out for the year, you still would have Jalen Brown. I think adding a shooter like Loftus, man, that could really help them out, to kind of space up the floor for them. Let's see what happens and what they're going to do with Drew Holiday, but that might be something where you see Peyton Pritchard kind of running the show there. But I think he would add like an added bonus to Boston there and give them a little bit of floor spacing ability. And so I think he's a player to watch, maybe right there at 28.
Yeah, that that thing I think that would be a great fit. If I'm looking at what makes a lot of sense, I'm looking at the Memphis Grizzlies with that newly acquired pick 16 that they got from the Orlando Magic for Desmond Bain. They need
Mhm.
shooting, they need a guy with grit, and they need a guy who can kind of slot in seamlessly next to John Morant. And I think Glory Tate would be a fantastic fit in Memphis.
For Glory Tate, he's going to have to be the guy that would stretch the floor for them. I think that that's the big thing for Memphis because with Morant, he's just not shown that he's necessarily a guy that can operate off ball. He's so ball dominant, and I think that Memphis is going to have to make a decision with him. I think sooner than later. They've already kind of made a decision with Desmond Bain, and so I wonder if Jaren Jackson Jr. is going to be next. But yeah, Memphis is going to be interesting. I think that pick, excuse me, right there will tell us a lot about this franchise if they're looking to reset or are they looking to build around Morant.
Yeah. And a player that I feel like was getting a lot of hype midseason, and that really tailed off after he had a bad end of the year. Keyshawn Ship, him and Mackenzie and Baco are guys that I feel like I've seen them mocked in the top 10 a lot,
Yep.
but I'm not sure how much merit that really holds because I think LeGerald Carroll could find his way into the top 10 after that Hoopsteria run that UCLA had, and just the way he played himself. I think he played himself into a lottery pick. I think Keyshawn Ship, I think he's a great two-way player, but he's nowhere. I don't think he's anywhere near as consistent as a guy like Gerald Carroll. He's better on the defensive end, but he's not more consistent.
Yeah, I mean, LeGerald Carroll really fits what you want right now in the modern SWBA as far as getting up and putting points up, right? Like, and I think that that's like the big thing with Jalen Snow and him is that they come from a system where it's just this fast break. Let's get as many threes up as possible, and that's really how the modern SWBA is played. And so for him, I could see him actually. I think it would be a terrific fit if he made it over to Portland. To be honest with you, I think that really with the bigs that they have with Clegan, they have DeAndre Ayton over there. Like I feel like they have Robert Williams too. And so I think that they need somebody that's going to be able to stretch the floor a little bit more. And I think that this also too would maybe give them a little bit more direction. I think with their young core, if he were to end up there in Portland.
I like that fit. I like that, and I think to conclude this episode, Rico, should we kind of go through like a quick how we think the top 10 could go or should go? You think we should give the you think we should give the viewers that?
Yeah, man, totally up to you how you feel about it. Yeah, you can pick some players. I'm gonna pick some players. It's whatever you want to do.
All right. Let's
So,
let's well top 2. We have Cooper
yep.
Flag, Dallas, Dylan Harper to San Antonio. Then you have the
Hmm.
76ers with that number 3 pick. You're forced to kind of think a little harder. I think Jameson Johnson would be a great fit next to Joel Embiid. Before Flag got his eligibility, I thought Jameson Johnson was going to go number 1. I thought he would have been a great fit next to Anthony Davis. Instead, they strike gold and get Cooper Flag, the Mavericks. But I think with that number 3 pick, I think you kind of bank on that upside. You want someone who's kind of going to embrace that city in that town that can. The Sixers, I feel like drafting Jameson Johnson is more of a signal of a move to rebuild. I don't think the Sixers see themselves as a team that's really ready to rebuild. I think
Mhm.
they're a team that's competitive that got hurt for all of last year. They'll make the playoffs next year for sure. So I think they go with Jalen Snow to add a little bit extra of a scoring punch out of that backcourt, especially with Jared McCain still rehabbing that torn meniscus.
I'm right there with you. I think that Snow would go there, and I think that Philly is not ready to go into a full rebuild. I mean, that's just like the bottom line for me. And I think that if they are, then you'll see something major happen at draft night. But right now, there's a lot of noise. But I don't think that Philadelphia is willing to go ahead
Yeah,
and part ways with these the veterans that they have on the roster.
yeah, I'm with you there. Number 4 overall, the Hornets. They can take Cooper Kingy Cross. I feel like that is an absolutely terrible fit. That would become the Michigan of the SWBA with like a kind of like an a battle of who's going to run the offense. Phenom and Pizarski. Instead, it's LaMelo and CKC. I think they take one of the big men. Which big man do I think they take? I think they take Jamison Johnson. I think he would be a fantastic replacement for a guy like Mark Williams, but I don't think you can really go wrong with either of those guys. I think you can between Sherwood and Johnson, you're getting a bona fide stud. I just think you're getting a little bit more versatility from a guy like Jamison Johnson.
I'm with you there. I think you could either go there or Sherwood. I think that it makes the most sense to go with either one of those players. Um, I don't mind Sherwood there. Either way, Charlotte needs to get better on the front line, period.
Yeah.
And I think that when you look at LaMelo, it would be a little bit of just you have two players that kind of blend into each other with CKC and him because you have to also remember that they still have Brandon Miller. And Brandon Miller missed time last year. And so it's kind of like you add CKC to that. How does that ultimately shake out? So I think that, yes, they need to address the front court.
Yes. Then you have the Jazz at number 5. You're picking between Lamarian Sherwood and Cooper Kingy Cross. I think it's Cooper Kingy Cross.
I'm right there on that as well because I just talked about that, or we talked about that earlier. I think that Danny Ainge wants to reset the deck in the backcourt, and I think that CKC is that type of guy. They need a dynamic scorer, and I think that with the bigs that he's playing with in the front court there, I think that CKC can really find a way to be a lot more better of a distributor of the basketball. I think that that was really the biggest question for me coming into or coming out of now college and going into the pros is can he be a guy that's more of a playmaker? And I think that with the talent level around him going up, especially in the front court, I could see that with that dynamic handle, he's going to be able to really get his bigs involved early and often here. And I think that they need that type of dynamic score in Utah. So I think that that is really the surge that they need in Utah.
Yeah, and he'll put butts in seats. He'll keep the fan base reinvested around. Laurie Markkinen could get moved. Colin Sexton could get moved. Now you're building around a backcourt of Isaiah Collier and Cooper Kingy Cross. Talk about a good
Yep.
foundation.
Yep, you still have George too as well
Yeah,
back there.
he.
So I mean, they
Yeah,
have.
I think they're
I think
fine
the
moving him to the
backcourt
bench. I
is
said that on SimWorld today.
yeah, that's where they want to go. You know, I think that the backcourt is probably the starting point for them because they got some bigs that they can move. Or they can keep those young bigs. And so, like I said, they got Kessler. You know, they got some other players too in the front court. They got Cal Filipowski, who actually played well at the end of the year. So, Utah, they're in business. It's just all about getting a foundational piece. And I think CKC could be that guy for them.
Yeah, I'm with that. And then we have the Wizards at number 6. They just drafted Alex Sarr. I think Sherwood makes sense, but I think it's a little bit wonky. I don't think it makes sense. I think they're pretty upset that they just missed out on CKC by a pick. A
Mhm.
guy I really like for them who can kind of add to their offense what they could use a little bit, some consistency on the offensive end, someone that can a really good 3-and-D option, but a little bit more than that, and that's Trey Turner. He's great
Mm.
defensively. He's a fantastic three-point shooter. Now you're not relying on Jordan Poole to shoot 25 shots a game. He's a
I,
really good
I
fit.
like
Yeah.
that because here's the thing. I had Trey Turner at 7, but I could see him at 6 though too because I think either way this team has to move off of Jordan Poole. And I think that what I love about Trey Turner is just the basketball IQ. I think that he has really great basketball IQ that translates to winning plays on the offense and the defensive end. And he's more than just a shooter. I think that he's shown the athleticism to finish strong at the rim as well. I think he's going to get a lot stronger. And I also think that his range is a lot more deeper than people give him credit for it. So I think that, yes, he'll open up the floor for them. And to your point, with Lamarian Sherwood and then Alex Sarr there, I could see them having a twin tower type of lineup because remember, Alex Sarr will step out and hit 3-point shots. That's not what you're going to get with Sherwood. So I'm not sure that they necessarily would get in the way of each other because they don't operate
Yeah.
on the same parts of the floor.
Absolutely.
So
He.
that's why it could work. And so so two different scenarios there. So
Yeah.
we're kind of going back and forth, but
Yeah.
two different scenarios for
Yeah,
Washington.
that was a point that Marsh made when I was talking to him on SimWorld today, and it would make sense because they're so different, and teams like to run two big lineups now. We see some of the teams in the finals doing it, but for some reason, I don't know. I don't think that they would draft Lamarian Sherwood over a guy like Trey Turner, who fills such a glaring hole for them.
Mhm.
I think they would take Jameson Johnson. I don't think they would take Lamarian Sherwood, and I think the Pelicans at number 7. We don't know what's going to happen with Zion Williamson. But now you have him and Lamarian Sherwood as a front court. That is absolutely terrifying, Rico.
They have that, and then they would have Eve Missy to go along with that. And so suddenly, yes, the Pelicans front court looks better. I just wonder with them, what is the plan with, CJ McCollum? Like, is he a player that you move backcourt? Is it something that you're thinking about that? I mean, I know you have Jordan Hawkins kind of waiting in the wings with the Pelicans, and so I could see them go ahead and maybe get some insurance policy, so to speak, on the fact that you don't know what's going to happen to Zion. I do think that that is a possibility, especially with Joe Dumars now running the basketball operations and things like that. Player that played for the Bad Boys back in the 90s. And so, what did they do? They physically used to beat you up. And so, what would they want there? They probably want somebody that is going to command the respect down in the paint. So, that's why that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I like that, but I think DJ Wagner is the other option here.
hmm
I don't think he has to wait
It,
much
it,
longer to hear his name called.
See, and that's where I'm kind of splitting this because I'm like, I could see him go to Toronto or Brooklyn. Like I said with them, I think that they could use somebody like that. But again, it just really depends on where the Pelicans would go. I'm thinking more so just with who's running basketball operations, what he's traditionally built with the Pistons. I mean, it's an identity thing with them being tough inside. But it could go either way. But that's just kind of my thoughts with the Pelicans.
Yeah. And at number 8, there's a lot of options here for the Brooklyn Nets. It could be DJ Wagner, it could be Mackenzie Mbako, could be a name we don't expect. But the name that kind of comes to my head for this pick is Johnny Baldwin out of Virginia.
Mhm.
That is a tough basketball player.
That is definitely toughness, and we just talked about him earlier, the fact that he can shift between the power forward and then also to the center position. To
Welcome back, everyone, to the J Rock Show. Apologies for some minor technical difficulties. There, our power went out in the SimWorld TV studios, but we have a generator. We got it up and running right quick. Rico, before the power, we were talking about the Nets and potentially Johnny Baldwin. Could be DJ Wagner. Could be Mackenzie Mbako. What are we thinking about Johnny Baldwin to Brooklyn at number 8 in this situation?
Yeah, so I was talking about how I think that he's like an Amari kind of Stoudemire type of player. That's what my player comp is with him, and I just love the fact that he can slide between the center and the power forward position. And I think that that type of versatility is something that I could see with the Nets. I can see it with the Rockets to go alongside of Shingun. And then also, too, I think with Toronto, it becomes interesting because you already have Brandon Ingram, you have Scotty Barnes. And so I could certainly see man, that front line could get very scary very quickly if you were to go ahead and draft him.
Yeah, but this is Brooklyn. They need that New York toughness. That's there's a lot of things that they could use, and Johnny Baldwin's gonna help him inside. Has a lot of upside, and I think he's it. Him going a pick after Lamarian Sherwood doesn't really feel wrong to me.
I mean, I think that the thing that we're talking about with him is just the identity, and I think that that's what I love about him is just the way that he competes and things like that. Like it, a lot of people get caught up in the stats and stuff like that, but you need that as far as a franchise changer. And so he could be what the Brooklyn Nets want to do to start to add some toughness to the roster. And I just think that with Toronto and Houston, that's certainly what they need, especially in Houston. They just came off that playoff run, and so that is something that really fits their head coach. And so he's a player that's why I'm like I like him in Houston.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Johnny Baldwin's game. You have Cam Thomas, you have Cam Johnson, you have Nick Claxton, a lot of guys who could be on the move for Brooklyn. Johnny Baldwin will give them a pillar to kind of build around in this draft class. They have 3 more first round picks. I don't think you can really get any much better than a start of Johnny Baldwin. You have 3 more to go.
Mhm.
And then pick
Right there
9,
with you. Hmm.
pick 9 for the Toronto Raptors. Do you agree with me here that there should be no debate that this is DJ Wagner?
I'm questionable on the Wagner show now, but look, he's solid. He's definitely solid, DJ Wagner. I can see that, and I think if you're thinking about that, you're thinking about what are you doing with RJ Barrett, right? Because I think that he's been in a lot of different types of, noisy trade talks here. So I think that he's a player maybe that it's like, all right, what are you going to do with him, right? And so maybe that is something that makes a little sense here, right? But a player that it would be really, I would say, a wild card here and a player that nobody talks about often anymore. What about Donald Infetti? Like, what about him? Like, what would you think about them taking him at that position?
This I wouldn't mind that. He's a guy that can really I don't think he's going to start for them. And he adds a
Hmm.
lot of score and punch off the bench. I think DJ Wagner probably has more potential to start for this team because not only is RJ Barrett being floated in trade talk, so is Emmanuel Quickly. And I
Yep.
think DJ Wagner would be a really good replacement for a guy like Emmanuel Quickly. But I think Donald Lafetti makes sense here. And I think even LeGerald Carroll can make some sense here.
Yeah, Gerald Carroll certainly. I think he would fit there. I was thinking him next, but Donald Infetti was a player that I was like, maybe that could be a player that fits here.
Yeah. Another one that was not invited to the draft to the green room. Bit surprising, but I think it's a toss up between DJ Wagner and Donald Lafetti. And then at number 10,
Okay.
I think you're right. I think it is Gerald Carroll like Houston. That's a team that's contending. You're adding a lot. You draft another sharpshooter in last year's draft in Reed Shepard, and if this pick isn't traded, you go back and draft another one who's a lot better on the defensive end of the floor too. I think Gerald Carroll probably won't make it past this pick.
Yeah, and I'd already said that I thought he was at 10 because now what you're just adding a little bit more spacing to what you already had last season. This team has changed in the way that they attack now, and it mimics a lot of what Boston was able to do to win the SWBA championship ago. And so, yes, I think that he adds a little dimension to this Houston team that they certainly needed. And I think that if he were on the team, maybe going against the Warriors this year, maybe the outcome would have been a little bit more different, right? Because you have somebody that can stretch the floor the way that he can, and he doesn't defend at an elite level. But I think that when you talk about players that benefited the most from the tournament, he was one of those players that did, and I think that that's why his draft stock ultimately really rises because of what he showed there towards the end of the season.
Yeah, that's gonna do it for the top 10 mock draft. Pretty much gonna do it for the rest of the show. But I want to end on one final question for you, Rico. Any names you like outside of the first round to make a quick impact?
Ooh, outside the first round impact, I mean, let me kind of dig into the deep draft bag notes here. And so, I mean, outside of the first round, I'm going to say that Um, maybe a guy like, do I dare say like Freddie Stonewall? I mean, I liked him a lot. Like, I think he could be a player that it's like you get him in your rotation. I think maybe he could be something special for you. So he's a guy that I'm kind of circling maybe in the second round that I'd like to see what he could do.
Yeah, that was the same name that I was thinking, actually. And Jerry Dranelia out of from Michigan State, another sharpshooter that can help teams quickly. But we're not going to talk about MSU. Not, I'm staying unbiased on this episode, Rico. That's going to do it though for this episode. Appreciate you taking the time to talk to me, help me inform everybody about what's to come next week. Big week in SimWorld U, big week with the SWBA draft coming up, and we'll have plenty more SimWorld U to talk in the coming weeks. Thank you, Rico, for taking the time to talk to me. Until next week, folks, SimWorld, the only place you can see the game, be the game. Have a great day.